Jedd Fisch gets an A+ for his first spring game.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's the site editor with Athlon Sports Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. And today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Game off. We got to talk more about Monopoly Go. This fast-paced game lets you team up with friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends. So download Monopoly Go, now free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. So, Lars, we are recording this after getting back from Washington's spring game, which took place on Friday night. And it was, honestly, I was really impressed by the whole experience. Like I said in the cold open, gave it an A+ because of the atmosphere, because of the vibes, because of everybody that came back for the game. And then on top of all that, just all the little extra events that took place over the course of the day with, the tip-off between the basketball coaches, the field goal kicking between Carson Bruener and Denzel Boston and the soccer coaches, and then the lineman punt catching contest. It was all a truly awesome experience.
Yeah, it's exactly what we expected from Jedd Fisch. The energy that he had given off throughout spring camp was a guy that wants to have fun, but also be serious when it matters. And you need to find that balance between the two, because when you have 18 to 22-year-old college kids, if you go too far to the left, you might lose the locker room. If you go too far to the right, you also might lose the locker room for a completely different reason. And we've seen both of those play out. Because to your point, we've seen coaches use that punting, the lineman punting thing in spring camp before. You and Roger Rosengarten, and I forgot who the other offensive lineman was.
Jacob Bandis. No, it was Jacob Bandis who did it last year.
Okay, well, so and Jimmy Lake did in 21 with Rosengarten and another offensive lineman, I believe. But it's still just it's not that just because some other coach did it doesn't mean you can't do it. But the way that Jedd Fisch cultivated it, the one thing also why it gets an A+, I can say it was an actual game. Again, was it the prettiest? Was it the smoothest? Was it a 4-quarter? I mean, shout out to Jedd for having a running clock. Thank you, sir, for that. We got out there in time, and it was beautiful. And also, it allowed. And part of it, I have to imagine, was a pace of play thing where you don't want to have the clock stop and figure out all this and that, because you're just trying to get the game in. That's what Jedd Fisch said in his post-game remarks, where we're just trying to get the game and we're just trying to hold the game. But you also want to have a game where we talked about this in the press box, where in years past, Washington doesn't really record stats for this. We'll say, there was a touchdown pass here and a nice run here and this and that, but they weren't actual true play touchdowns. Where Friday night we saw Adam Muhammad keep his legs churning and get in for a touchdown. We saw Denzel do Denzel things. Ladies and gentlemen, that is why you picked Denzel Boston number 1 overall. But with that being said, and that's also why you take Will Rogers as an undrafted free agent in your very last pick. But those two things aside, it was exactly what we expected, where it wasn't going to be full go. It was probably 60%.
Sure, except for Vincent Holt at 150%, but that's a different story. But speaking of the defense, I'm sorry to cut you off. One thing that we also mentioned that was honestly probably the best part of all of it was the end around from that Carson Bruener took and threw the ball back across the field to Jonah Coleman. Shout out to wide receivers coach Kevin Cummings, who Jonah Coleman said after the fact that it was his idea to put that play in there, and that he asked everybody on the gold team, all right, who's got the best arm? And everybody said Carson Bruener. So Carson Bruener had himself a day in all three facets of the game, and we're going to get in that more a little bit later. But it just adds to exactly what you're saying, Lars, the fun aspect, the competition aspect of all of it, which we've seen throughout all of spring camp. When you talk about Pete Carroll coming in and having a little fun with the guys and after practice, and just everything else we've seen when it comes to them playing Sandstorm, which it seems to just indicate whatever the most competitive period of the scrimmage portion of practice was going to be. All of that just plays into exactly what Jedd Fisch's messaging has been throughout spring camp, and it's really fun to see it all.
And as you were saying that, speaking of the intensity and the reason why it wasn't certainly at full go, and it just dawned on me, I don't think Scotty Graham was wearing a headband yesterday. because when I saw him come, because when I saw him come back down through the tunnel towards the end, get a little fist bump, it was just it. There was no headband. So again, it wasn't a full go, but even at 60%, we saw a lot of guys make some plays, and I think that's the encouraging sign. Is we knew it wasn't going to be full go just because of the offensive line, and that already was going to be what took out about 20 to 25%. So going beyond that, still having guys show that effort, make those plays, and not just mail it in and say, well, it's okay. I mean, there was a couple of plays where, let's be real, I think Damon had a touchdown or a very, very, very long throw that also had 2 sacks about 3 seconds before that. So
yeah, there were a couple of those.
And that's why we had talked about that on the show throughout spring camp, where if you come out to practice and you watch some of the stuff, when we say, hey, so-and-so had a touchdown pass or whatever, usually we'll try and caveat that if there was a lineman in the area, we'll say, in real life, that's probably a sack or he throws it away. But the other side of that is maybe he throws it away. It's an incompletion. You live to fight another down, so it's not actually a sack. But all of these cultivate into this is what you want to see in the spring. You want to see these young guys going after it so that when you get into fall camp and you're supplementing it with the transfers, you're not looking at these young guys saying, okay, now's the time. Now's the time. No, spring is the time. Yeah. And then you carry it over into fall once you get in the summer conditioning program.
Absolutely. And then just kind of on top of that, another thing we got to make sure we mention, because it was just such a big portion of just the entire conversation leading up to all this, with all the open practices, with everything, was the fans. And it was a really awesome showing from the crowd. They got a really huge cheer when Michael Penix was shown on the Jumbotron and everything. And it was just really great to see where, the first number we were given up in the press box was 15,000 fans, got updated a little bit later to 18,500. And whatever the exact number was, it was a really, really great showing. And it was really cool to see how many people wanted to come out and wanted to see what was going on. And that the marketing scheme that Jedd Fisch had used, which was, we're going to just show this to you every single day. You're going to remember that this is just everything about it. Just like the video the players put out the other day, just May 3rd. Seeing all that was really cool. And that fans, bought into it. It was all great. I love that aspect of all of it.
And I think also the one thing that we hinted at a little bit is there's 2 elements of the pro side of this, where you bring in a Jack Del Rio, you bring in a Pete Carroll, but none of those luminaries were at the spring game. It was all players. And I think that's what's more important, because it's cool to have Pete Carroll and coaches and John Lynch and all that sort of stuff in, but these players want to be like those players. So having Adam Muhammad come around, or who's a good example? The linebackers being around Shaq Thompson, Sebastian Valdez, and the defensive linemen being around Danny Shelton and Vita Vea, the cornerbacks being around Marcus Peters, which I think, fair to say, John Richardson is bringing back the death row defense, and it's perfect that Marcus Peters is coming back around for this, because shout out to Marcus Peters, hooked Elijah Jackson up, and I believe some other players, with a very nice custom "We Ain't Done Yet" Dogs 21 hoodie.
I saw that.
And so,
yes.
And you cannot. So, FYI for fans, I'll come out with a story on Athlon. Actually, the story is probably going to be out by the time this episode airs. But it's those little details, those little relationships that guys can have, because Marcus Peters was that original guy that set the bar, that said, again, did his time end great? No. But all the players don't think about how it ended. They think about what he is and what he's done in the NFL, and that's all that matters. And Jedd understands that. Jedd, with his NFL background, knows these relationships matter for players in high school, college, and in the NFL, so that when you go to the NFL, you want to be able to put on for your college and say, hey, I'm a proud alum of the University of Washington. Forget what happened in the past. This guy, I have a great relationship with him. I'm proud to be back at Washington. And that's exactly what Washington needs moving forward under Jedd Fisch.
Lars, that being said, let's get into some of the stars from the day. Right after a message from our friends over at LinkedIn, because when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has a tool to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. That's because LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In any given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of most small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. You can hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn because LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. And that's why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockdowncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockdowncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Lars, I feel like it was pretty easy to find an MVP from Friday's spring game, where offensively it was certainly Denzel Boston, and defensively and on special teams, because Grady Gross had a good day, but defensively and special teams certainly goes to Carson Bruener. And then you got to give some flowers to Jeremiah Hunter as well, because he also had a fantastic day. And who do you want to start with there?
I'm gonna start with my agenda. What's our agenda? But I was
going to say, hold on here.
It absolutely is our agenda. But since I did make the pick, I mean, that's why when we talked about Denzel this spring, it wasn't hype. It wasn't, hey, he's going to be the next guy. Well, he's going to be the next guy because he already kind of was that next guy. He was that last guy. He was that guy last season. He just didn't get the reps because he had a first-round pick and two day 2 picks in front of him. There's not much he can do about that. And also, let's be real, in a national championship run, it would have been reprehensible to play Denzel in that role. But that's why he sits behind those guys like Rome, Jalen, so that he can emerge this season. We've seen that throughout the first 13 practices. And honestly, he probably could have had 12 for 180 and 2 touchdowns if we're being real in the spring game. But that's exactly what you want to see from Denzel, where we know what Jeremiah Hunter's size is, but Denzel doesn't have necessarily that top high size, but he's so physical. He looks so ready to just be the guy that linking up with Will Rogers and also getting some reps with Damon Williams, I think is important. But knowing that Will Rogers is more likely than not, I'm not going to say he's going to be the starter, but he's going to be the starter. So, and that's not a surprise. But getting that relationship down in the spring, just imagine what they're going to be doing over the next couple of months. And we saw that. We saw that with Will working with Jeremiah after a couple of practices, where it's not just focusing on, because that was the one critique that I would have of that relationship, was there was a number of plays where Will didn't even he went full Michael Penix and didn't even bother looking away from anybody else other than Denzel. Similar to where Penix knew he's going to Rome, and if he misses, he misses, and it's an incompletion or whatever. But having Denzel truly emerge as that one guy, Jeremiah can be your 2, and then Giles can be your 3, and you just roll with that. But Denzel is perfectly suited to be in that outside role. Just take the top off the defense, go over. He really has almost a full route tree, and certainly he's going to have to refine it a little bit. But I don't think there's necessarily a route that he can't run. It's just a matter of, can he out physical guys on a consistent drive-on-drive basis? Because we saw it against Price Hawk, but then we also didn't see it against Price Hawk sometimes. We saw it against Thaddeus Dixon, and then a couple of plays we wouldn't see it against Thaddeus. So as long as he can find that consistency, but I'm not worried about him finding that consistency, given he's shown it 3 out of every 6 plays, 5 plays. So just getting it to 4 out of 5, which is not that much different.
And that's something where he's got a huge opportunity now to continue to add strength to his frame, because that was something that, coming into 2023, and this is by no means a comparison, but that was the same conversation we were having about Rome, where it was, can he add this extra 5-10 pounds to his frame and continue to get stronger and be more physical at the catch point? And we've seen Denzel win the catch point over and over and over again. And if he can continue to just get stronger, he can just outplay anybody in the Big Ten, truly, where that's just kind of what his ceiling is from what we've seen from him athletically, from some of the plays we've seen him make this spring, from some of the plays we've seen him make just in the spring game on Friday. And then on top of that, I want to touch on one thing you said there real fast, where you're absolutely right when it came to just the one read from Will Rogers, where on the interception he threw, that was the one thing where that whatever route was called, it was very clearly locked up. Ephesians Price Hawk did a great job playing press and not letting Denzel get a clean release. And Will Rogers didn't really know where else to go with the ball, and he just kind of threw it up over the corner of the end zone instead of just throwing the ball out of the back of the end zone, just saying, all right, well, we'll live for the next down. Tried to make a play, and Denzel was like, dude, I'm not open. Like, this is not a good idea. And Price Hawk made a great play to turn that into an interception. And then we saw a little bit later on in the game, just to stay with the receivers here for a minute, we saw Jeremiah Hunter catch a fantastic ball from Damon Williams in the corner of the end zone for a touchdown. And then he did that on Curly Reed, and then on the very next play on the 2-point conversion, did the same thing to Darren Barkins on the other side of the field. And it's something you and I, we talked about our buddies, Ben Glassmeyer, Alex Katzen, Nick Lemkow. We've talked with all of them over the course of some of these spring practices about how many fades they run in the end zone. And then, because, the play itself can be debated for hours and hours and hours. And then you look at, it's Denzel Boston, Jeremiah Hunter, and you see what they're able to do on some of these fade routes. That's okay. I'm fine with that personally.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to the fade. I don't think either of us are opposed to the fade route. It's just it gets to your point, though. It gets back to this last season. Can you do something else other than the corner fade, where we know you got the Penix to Rome connection and maybe the Penix to Jalen connection? Do you have that third and fourth release valve, which is Quayton Moore probably on a not a curl route, but kind of a post out route where he takes the underneath route. Jeremiah goes out towards the pylon, and one of those two guys is going to be open. But then you also have to add in with the running backs. Can those guys get going? I think, again,
Adam Muhammad showed he can.
Adam Muhammad, but the only reason I was just being hesitant there was like, until I see the offensive line, I just want to reserve a little bit more judgment. But otherwise, the running backs in the room, which is what I wrote on Athlon Sports, the running backs, that stable is pretty healthy. Now, again, we didn't see Cam Davis, but I don't think that's necessarily a surprise just because of what we've seen from him through spring camp. The point is to get him healthy for fall camp. Same thing with Zach Durfee. Same thing with Elijah Jackson, where he was suited but didn't play. There's a number of these guys that didn't make an impact, but that's not because they won't make an impact in the fall. So it was good to see those young guys show that they could do it, to your point, Adam Muhammad, because whether they're counted on or not this year, those are the guys that are going to be here 25, 26, and 27 that actually matter.
Absolutely. So with that being said, we got to spend a couple minutes on Carson Bruener, because he's somebody who I think we have just the highest expectations for on the defensive side of the ball in terms of what he did last season, what now stepping into a full-time starting role, what he can do this year. And he's also going to be one of the leaders on the team. He's one of the first people to talk to us at spring camp. And he said a lot of just like, I don't care about the money, to quote him and not use the expletives here. I don't care about the NIL money or anything like that. I want to play for Washington. That's always something that I've wanted to do. And so getting to see him step into that bigger role is awesome, just because of the backstory with his dad being a Husky star and everything else along those lines. But then on top of that, when you just see what he can do on the field, not only, now playing linebacker, but as a pseudo quarterback and a kicker, it's just fun to see him have an opportunity in his final year on Montlake to do all of these extra things in the spring game. And obviously we're not going to see either of those things this fall. If we do, something has gone horribly wrong. Something's gone just absolutely horribly wrong. No offense, because that was truly a dime to Jonah Coleman, but it's just, it's so exciting to see that and just see because, when we think about last year's team, basically everybody has left outside of the only full-time starters that are coming back are Cameron Fabiculanan and Elijah Jackson. Those are the two, Alfonso Tupatala would count over Camp Fab, where he didn't start more than half the games. But when we look at Carson, he's just one of the guys that you think about down the stretch of, he was such a big contributor in helping get the team to the national championship. And then now just coming back into this role, I'm really excited about what he can do.
I just want to go on record right now. This is May 4th. I guarantee you Carson will have at least one pass attempt this season. Just guarantee. Okay. Just guarantee. We'll revisit this in probably 5 or 6 or 7 months from now. But the way that he threw that ball, here's the thing. That was a sidearm about 40 yards in the air, plus another 15 to 20 on the ground. So he did not short that. And the way, when I saw him he almost looked like he was kind of just like a practice, just chucking it, trying to go 5-10 yards. And he put some Michael Penix on that. We're like, oh, wow, the flick of the wrist goes 40 yards. And then he's got the back flips, got the front flip. Really, I think Carson Bruener has come into his own. And it wasn't, it's the Denzel on defense, where he could have done it last season, but you had two veteran starters. Carson's not going to bump out Eddie. Let's just be real. And nor should he. Same thing with Denzel, not bumping out any of the trio of three horsemen last year.
Sure.
But those guys getting all those reps last year and watching them in the shadows allows them to come into this season as basically starters in their head already. He's like, hey, I started last year. I didn't actually start last year, but I should have been a starter. So I'm coming in with that mindset versus, oh, now I got to play catch up, because Carson's a kid from day one where I'm like, him and Eddie kind of had that same NFL body where it's a little different, right? But Carson just seems like that prototypical middle linebacker, athletic and blitz, can do everything. And so it's cool to see him really take that leadership role this spring.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lars, that being said, there were also a whole bunch of transfers. There were recruits there. And Jedd Fisch, he left his press conference early, like, hey, I got 15 guys up there I need to go talk to. Let's get into some of those guys. Right after a message from our friends over at Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get, like unique stickers you can trade with your friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the board with, and hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges to include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now free on the App Store or Google Play. All right, game on. So, Lars, you were down traversing the sidelines a little bit before the game. Shout out to Lou Dog for putting that picture on Twitter of you certainly trying to bull rush Danny Shelton. That was fantastic. Anybody who hasn't seen that needs to go check that out. That was wonderful. But while you were down there, you were saying, oh, hey, I see this guy here. I see that guy here. Is there anybody that really stood out to you, whether it be from just a physical frame standpoint or just somebody that you could tell just seemed very high on Washington's list right now?
Yeah, speaking of, we're keeping the theme of Bishop Gorman talking about Roma Dunze, Douglas Utu. Like, my word. Like,
yeah.
That I pointed him out to you on the side of that, and I'm like, that's him. That's him. And now I see it now. And again, even without pads on or, seeing him on film, it's one of those, you can see why he's a top, I believe, 5 player at his position in the country, and according to 247 in the 2025 class. He's that type of tackle where he's a 3-year starter, 2-3-year starter, a guy that you just cement on the left side and say, you're going to run behind him and whoever your left guard is. And if your center wants to pull, more power to you. But those are the type of linemen where we've seen it time and time again, where these guys come in and then 3 or 4 years from now, they're in the NFL as a first-round pick. There's just certain guys that have that size, that toughness, that playing style. And coming from Bishop Gorman, you're pretty much bred to be a pro anyway. So all that together, he was at a dead set look at the offensive line, and Brennan Carroll looking like a consigliere with the slick back hair and the gray beard. It all just had the vibes of, you know what, this is a guy that would fit perfectly in Brennan Carroll's room. It's a guy that Brennan Carroll knows technique, knows how to develop guys. Not that Scott Huff didn't, but it's a perfect segue into that, where going from one good developer to another good developer along the offensive line keeps that continuity where Washington put Troy Fautano in the first round last year or this past season. Caleb McGarry a couple of years ago. Keep churning out these first-round linemen, and under Jedd Fisch and Brennan Carroll, I think Douglas Utu is a perfect guy that could, 3-4 years from now, continue on in that mold.
Absolutely. So in that same vein, because we didn't see many, offensive line recruits from the transfer portal. At least none of them were publicized just over the days leading up to it. But a couple of guys that we did see from the transfer portal, one of them is Nevada tight end Keleki Latu. There's so many Latus. Shout out to Latu, by the way. We didn't get a chance to shout out to him for getting drafted in the first round. He's somebody who, he said it on Twitter, the Husky for life, no matter what happens. So that's another one where you and I have talked about some depth at the tight end position. He's somebody that I wouldn't be surprised if Washington ends up reeling in a commitment from him to just kind of round out the tight end room, where I wrote about it over on Huskies Wire that I think Decker DeGraff has had a chance to play his way into a significant role this season. And I think Keleki Latu would be a really, really big help for Decker, where he's somebody where Decker can still play. Decker can still play in his 4 games and find a way to, get on the field, produce, probably play a little bit with Damon Williams and see what happens there. But having another veteran tight end in the room is something you and I have talked about as being very, very important for the future of the program. And another thing where just in the same vein of the transfer portal, where another position where you can never have too many talented bodies is at running back. And another Arizona guy who we've hinted at a little bit is Jordan Washington was up on a visit over the weekend, and he's somebody who runs a 10-2 400-meter dash, and former 4-star recruit, had stayed with Arizona and eventually opted to enter his name in the transfer portal, where he's another guy where Lars, you and I have talked about it, where he could create a real just thunder and lightning combination with Adam Muhammad that I think would be a lot of fun to watch.
Oh yeah, and I think that's exactly what you want to do when you look at what Scotty Graham has in that room. He has a multitude of different types of backs, where even Adam Muhammad, once he gets in the program a little bit and bulks up more, he could be that. I believe you said Myles Gaskin, right? Or was it Savon? Because Jordan Washington was Savon.
Jordan Washington was the Savon comp, yeah.
Right. And so, but it's that thunder and lightning combination where you have both of them together doing their own separate things on the same roster. That's why you want to get a different kind of an eclectic mix, shall we say, of running backs, because if you have 3 bruisers, that's cool, but you have 3 battering rams, and if they can't run through an offensive line, or if they can't break through the defensive line, it doesn't matter. We saw Adam Muhammad this spring be able to bounce outside a little bit, but he's really seems to be, once he bulks up, maybe more of a between the tackles type of runner. Jordan Washington is a guy who can do anything, and Adam Muhammad can do also, be a pass catcher as well and go out on the flank. So having all 3 different types of running backs allows Scotty Graham and Jedd Fisch and Jimmy Jordy in this offense to just do so many different things. And that's why you don't want to pigeonhole yourself when you look at the running back room and say, wow, there's a lot of guys in there. Sam Adams didn't play in the spring game, where he had been kind of practicing and then kind of not throughout the spring. And, there's certain other guys where Will Nixon left earlier before spring practices started. So you just look at that room and think, okay, there could be some attrition, there could be not, but whatever the case may be, getting a talent like Jordan Washington is somebody you don't pass on. Even if he ends up only playing 4 games this season, who cares? Imagine an offense with Devon Williams and then a 2 running back set of Adam Muhammad and Jordan Washington, and just watch what happens.
That's a gorgeous triple option right there. I love the thought of that, but I want to move back over to the high school ranks for a second, because one guy who we only touched on for a minute in the last time we talked about transfers, or excuse me, just recruiting last week, is Champ Taulealea, where that's somebody where in the same mold as Douglas Utu, we see why this guy is such a highly ranked recruit. And he's somebody who I'm really intrigued by, because I like his positional versatility. I like the power and the strength that he plays with. And I really like his game as a whole. And this is somebody where, if Washington takes 5 offensive linemen in this class, I wouldn't be surprised, because it seems like this is going to be a huge class in terms of the actual numbers. And with all the blue chip recruits that they're getting on campus, I wouldn't be surprised if there are some really highly ranked recruits in this class as well. And Taulealea is one of those guys where I think he would fit really well along this offensive line, whether it be at guard or at tackle. And it's fun because you can say the same thing about Douglas Utu, and you can say the same thing about a whole lot of these guys that they're recruiting. I know something you've talked about with Jake Flores. And just the more you look at it, this could turn out to be such a good class, and it really is going to start in the trenches.
And that's where it has to start, because when you're going to the Big Ten, I remember talking with Philip Bleedy where the Big Ten is all about the trenches. Yeah, you have nice quarterback play, you have nice wide receiver play, all that. You don't have any of it without offensive line play. And we've seen Washington, not under Kalen DeBoer, but in previous seasons, even under Chris Peterson, the offensive line was good but not great. And we've seen the difference. We saw this past season. When you have a top 3, top 5 offensive line, those are the ones that make it in the college football playoff. Those are the ones that are playing in semifinal games. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to be like that on a year in and year out basis, but the only way you truly can do that is by signing those guys out of high school and developing them class after class after class. That's why, to your point, this is going to be such a thick class, no pun intended, along the offensive line, because you want those guys to develop in your program versus have to, and we've seen it with the spring portal. Maybe those guys don't enter the portal. So that's why you have to have those guys coming in through the high school ranks, because, you can supplement with the portal and find a Chad Adams or find a D'Angelo Titiale, which are fine pieces. But
Chris
in terms
Adams.
of Chris Adams, what did I say?
Chad.
Chad, whatever. But no, Chris Adams, yes. But having those supplements are okay as long as they are 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe in some reserve supplements, right? But you don't want those starters every year to be coming out of the portal, because that kind of speaks to a lack of development. And the one thing Jedd has said from day one is, we are going to build this from the high school up. No doubt we're going to go in the portal, but we would be better. We are better off going and getting some of these guys and using the resources in the high school ranks to get, let's say, 70%, 80% of the roster, and then supplement the other 30 to 20% with transfers, versus kind of going in reverse, which is what he had to inherit. We need to find about 5 or 6 offensive linemen in the portal, because we can't sign 3 or 4 or 5 more offensive linemen in the 24 class, because anybody they would sign in the 24 class is not, that's not the route.
Absolutely. And so that's one of the reasons over the next couple of months, we're going to be spending so much time on the class of 2025, because it's going to be so important for, I know we see, especially Arizona fans in our comments all the time saying, oh, well, Jedd's going to leave after XYZ. We're not even going to acknowledge that. We're not even going to acknowledge that aspect of it. But when it comes to the way he wants to build his team, all of that is going to be really, really important to watch. When it comes to, all right, is he going to be able to follow through and bring in a top 15 class? What are those players going to look like? Who is he going to be able to bring in specifically? And it's all going to come down to fit, to development, to all these different things. And I'm really curious to see what that looks like. And Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the engineers for tuning in. We really do appreciate your constant support. It's really cool to just, see all the support we've gotten just on social media and everything. We really do appreciate all of it. It means a whole lot to us. And seeing Lars just, standing next to Danny Shelton on the sideline is wonderful. That was my personal favorite part of all of that. But no, seriously, it does mean a lot to us. And now that we're in the official mode of the Washington offseason, we've got so much fun stuff when it comes to transfer portal, recruiting, probably going to get some interviews, maybe do some NFL draft stuff along the way. So make sure you keep it right here on Locked On Huskies and subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere, updating the channel, do content every single day. So please make sure you hit that subscribe button, click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. If you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it'll really just help the show out a lot. And if you got any questions, comments, concerns, people you might want to see us interview, anything like that, please feel free to drop a comment down below. We're trying to get back to as many of you as you possibly can. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Tuesday.